Hello, everyone. I am Dan Kaufman, Sport Techie's Managing Director, and I have the honor of introducing our first piece of content for the inaugural Sports Capital Symposium. Welcome to the stage for a keynote conversation. The Commissioner of the NHL. I am Dan Kaufman, Sport Techie's Managing Director. The Commissioner of the NHL, Gary Bettman, in conversation with Sport Techie senior writer Joe Lemire. Enjoy.
All right. Thank you very much, Dan. And we are thrilled to introduce the commissioner, who is live inside the NHL bubble in Edmonton. How is your hotel room, which I know you've gotten very acquainted with this week?
It's great to be with you. It's great to be in Edmonton. I don't think I've ever been introduced before as a piece of content. So these are truly unusual times.
2020. These are the buzzwords: bubble, content, and so on.
The bubble is doing well. I've been here for I think this is a week, and I got out of isolation on Monday. We have a requirement if you're joining the bubble, you have to basically isolate at home for a week in advance and take 3 COVID-19 tests. And then when you get to the bubble, you have to isolate in your room. And I mean, isolate, not allowed to leave for 4 days and be tested every day. And we test everybody here every day. And we've done, between the 2 bubbles, over 31,000 tests.
Amazing. Certainly sports of all the various professional sports have taken different approaches to constructing a bubble, or at least in Major League Baseball's case, not having a bubble up until this point. Now that you've gone through it, certainly seems like it's gone very well. How would you assess how it has gone, and is there anything that you would do differently if you're forced to do it again?
Well, we've had people on the ground here in Edmonton. So let's back up. We had 2 bubbles, one in Toronto for 12 Eastern teams, and one in Edmonton for the 12 Western teams. And that was a function of having a play-in round, because our competitive balance was so great that when we stopped playing in the middle of March and took the pause, there were a number of clubs that had played different numbers of games. And we have a history of teams having races to the playoffs right down to the wire. So we had to be fair to the teams. Interesting use of words that I was using at the time. It just occurred to me that there were teams on the bubble of making the playoffs. And we decided that if we were going to return to play, and this was something that we had worked on in close collaboration with our Players Association, first and foremost, it had to be health and safety. And when we took the pause, we asked our players to stay home and to self-isolate. We then, a few weeks later, opened our training facilities on a limited basis. And then we went to training camp where the players were being tested regularly. And we always believed that in order to protect the players' health and safety, we had to create a safe environment, bring players to a common place, test regularly, and make sure we were doing all the appropriate protocols, whether it was masks in public or social distancing. And that's what we've done. So when we got to the conference finals and there were only 4 teams left, we decided to bring everybody to one place to play the last 2 rounds. The Dallas Stars are going to the Stanley Cup final, and Tampa and the Islanders will play a game tonight. If the Islanders win, they'll play a game again on Saturday night. And whenever this series is over, we're going to head into the Stanley Cup final. I don't want to jinx it, not that I'm superstitious. We haven't had among our team personnel, each team was allowed to bring 52 people. We had about 150 people in staff between the 2 bubbles, and there have been no positive tests. And we're in the home stretch.
Amazing. Not that anyone in professional sports is superstitious, of course.
No, never.
Never. So normally in September, we're starting to think about training camps and a new season starting. And I'm sure it's a delight that this one isn't even over. And I'm sure that plans are underway for next year. are you able to discuss any of the scenarios that are under discussion? Would it be another bubble environment?
Well, the two things. It's interesting that you focus on next season. When I looked at my calendar this past Monday, as I was at 9 o'clock in the morning, being allowed to exit my room, and the first thing I did was go outside for some fresh air. I looked, and my calendar said I was supposed to be in Buffalo at officials training camp for the 2021 season, and what a difference a year makes, so to speak. When we established this bubble and we had our return to play discussions, and as part of the return to play, and I'll take this off on a little tangent, we worked with the players on what the format of play should be, and the players were very focused on the fact that they wanted to complete the 1920 season and award the Stanley Cup. They were fully supportive of the play-in round, and interestingly enough, since everybody was going to be isolated in a bubble, we said, do you want to shorten the first two rounds of the playoffs after we got out of the best of five play-in round? And do you want to play best of five in the first two rounds? And the players' response was absolutely not. Whoever wins the cup this year needs to do it the way it's normally been done, playing the same number of games in a round. We also worked together on the health and safety protocols, which we discussed, including testing, and we were able to extend the collective bargaining agreement for 4 more years. So we have 6 years of labor peace, and knowing our history in collective bargaining, that was no small accomplishment, but it was a testament to how collaborative this process was. And that's a testament to the Players Association, particularly Executive Director Donald Fear. But when we announced what we were doing, we didn't announce where we were going. And for a number of weeks, there was a lot of speculation and even a tinge of criticism by some of the media that covers our game, saying, well, just announce where you're going. And there was speculation as to a whole host of cities, including, for example, Las Vegas. And I had decided that based on the state of knowledge and data around where COVID-19 was peaking and where it was declining, we didn't want to make a decision until the last possible moment, so that we could go to the safest place for us, because there were, even though we were in a bubble, there were going to be people that we had to test that were coming in to be service providers and the like. And ultimately, when we looked at the data and we got to the last second, we concluded that going to Canada made the most sense. So, long-winded answer to getting to your question, namely, we're considering all the options like we did for this return to play for next season. We've created a notional date of December 1st, which would be nice to shoot for. Whether or not it's December 1st, the end of December, beginning of January, we've been saying from the outset for at least the last couple of months, it depends. And we're going to have to know a lot more, but we're considering every contingency and making sure that we're going to have the flexibility to adapt to and implement whatever we think makes sense. I will say, though, nobody has an expectation that the players for 8 months or 6 months are going back into a bubble again. And I know because I've spoken to a number of players who have been sensational, but even our own staff, we have people who've been here in Edmonton, including Steve Mayer, who runs our events and content departments and was responsible for setting up both bubbles. I think he's been here for 65 or 66 days, and we're likely to be here at least another 2 weeks. And everybody's doing great, even psychologically, but it's tough to be away from home and family and friends for this long, particularly for our players, many of whom have young children. And this has really shown a level of commitment, passion for the game, and professionalism, which I never doubted, but which is absolutely fabulous to see.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you, both from your own background in other sports and just as a sports fan, I'm sure you have an eye on what other sports are doing. Was there any element that from a different league that you thought, that we should try that?
No, we all chat occasionally. We all know what everybody was doing, as it relates, I guess, principally NBA and us, the two arena sports that typically play through the winter. We were all focused on the same thing, and the NBA created their bubble in Florida. We had a little bit of a more difficult logistical issue, and it also impacted where we chose to go because we need ice. It's not as easy to set up a facility to play games or to even have practice without sufficient ice surfaces, and that was a consideration. And having been here and toured the bubble, to think that we started with 12 teams in each bubble, and we had to coordinate playing schedules, sometimes 3 games in a building in a day, and practice schedules and everything else. I could say it was a logistical nightmare, but actually they turned it into a logistical marvel. And I can't be more proud of the league office staff that did this.
Mm-hmm. Well, everyone working at home was all too happy to have that television on all day long and having breakfast with the NHL.
Yeah, well, you have to make the best of difficult situations. You have to do your homework, and you've got to be prepared to execute, which again goes to your question about next season. We hope to play a full season. We hope we can do it with fans in the building. But if we can't, we're going to have to adapt and do something that makes sense. But, everything starts with what takes place on the ice. And whatever you do has to be entertaining, exciting, compelling, competitive, and has to have integrity.
Mm-hmm. Well, and integrity is a good word to jump off here. Certainly, that's always the word that gets connected to sports betting. That's certainly been a major thrust of this conference. I was in attendance when you announced the major MGM Resorts deal a year or 2 years ago. What is the latest on that partnership, and what do you see as the future of sports betting in your league?
I think sports betting will continue to play an important revenue role, but as importantly, I think it's just another way that our fans can connect with our game. It's another way to create interest. It's another way to, in effect, give people an opportunity to concentrate on the game in the ways that are important to them. Having a little more control over why you're viewing and what you're viewing is a good thing. It creates opportunities for us, not just to market and promote with our betting partners, whether it's William Hill or MGM or FanDuel. What it also has given us an opportunity to do is use technology as another way to connect, and that's with puck and player tracking, and I'm sure we'll get to that, but that's going to create the ability of people to focus on elements of the game and perhaps even bet on them as we move forward. Sports betting has become a major industry. Just look at what's happening with the marketplace for sports rights in that environment. Look at the marketplace for stocks that may be traded having to do with sports betting. And, it's grown rapidly. I mean, New Jersey, for example, has surpassed Nevada as the sports betting capital in terms of the amount of money that's being wagered. Part of that's obviously because it's a major metropolitan area, but a part of that is because there's a great deal of interest in sports betting and how fans will connect with the game. And it may also create an opportunity for sports to attract interest in people who hadn't followed a particular sport because, maybe it's a quiet night and the only thing they can bet on is a sport that they don't typically follow, and that may connect them and hook them.
Mm-hmm. Certainly New Jersey is an interesting case because it's obviously so close to New York, and I've heard more than a few stories that the Secaucus train station has become practically a sports book, the way that people will take the train across the river, place a few bets, and then come on back.
Or drive across the George Washington Bridge and go into Fort Lee,
Yeah,
and then turn around and drive back.
yeah.
But part of that, what you've indicated is, and it's right. There is no national policy right now, so it's state by state, and a number of states. I don't know, 19 states, I think. I may be a little off. Have legalized sports betting. Another 3, 4, half a dozen are considering it. I think as it becomes more national, it'll be easier for all of us to interact with the major national players.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the revenue component of it, and whether it's through sports betting or other avenues. Certainly, the pandemic has had an effect on the revenue of all sports not being able to get the gate. Although the media contracts are certainly a big part of revenue for leagues these days. Have there been any considerations to be more aggressive with sports betting, or are there other ideas in development to sort of that wouldn't have come about if not for the pandemic?
Well, I'm not sure that at this stage any of the leagues can focus on sports betting as a mitigating factor in a material way for the loss of gate receipts. Gate receipts is extraordinarily important to all the leagues. Of the 4 majors, we're probably more dependent on gate receipts, directly or indirectly, people in attendance, whether it's parking, food or beverage or everything else. It's a little over 50% of our revenues. Sports betting isn't going to make up that gap. However, to the extent it makes us a more valuable media property because more people are tuning in, that's important. But, sports betting for us, well, we had started before PASPA was overruled by the Supreme Court. We began working on what we call puck and player tracking. It's to create more data. A typical game for us will probably create in the course of the game a million 3-pronged data points a game. And so whether it's the speed of the puck, how fast players are skating, how far they skate, distance around, as we viewed that, and it was important to us to develop it, which we helped invent by getting the right organizations focused on the technology and how to make it work. We viewed that as a broadcast enhancement. The fact that this now can become a vehicle for prop betting is yet another opportunity for people to connect with the game and for sports betting interests to create different types of betting opportunities. We are now using it. We had originally planned on using it for the playoffs, and the pandemic intervened. We started using it this round on a practice basis. Our broadcasters are using it, and we're going to use it more extensively in the Stanley Cup final. It works. It's terrific. It really brings you inside the game. So from a broadcast enhancement standpoint, it's great. There'll be an opportunity ultimately for a second screen experience for fans to get what they want out of the game in terms of insights. Coaches and players are using it, and it will create, as I said, sports betting opportunities as well in real time.
Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough just before the pandemic to get a good behind-the-scenes tour of its installation at the Prudential Center. And at the time, some of your league office employees were drafted into service for a pickup game just to test it out. And while I think those slap shots peaked at around 70 miles per hour, so far short of what you're going to see in an NHL game. But even with them, you could see the potential of it. How much do you see how much do you see teams, you alluded to it a little bit, but teams and players using it for tactical advantage? Have you started seeing
we have relationships with Apple, with SAP, and I think a lot of people have noticed this. There are iPads on the bench, and you will frequently in the course of a game see coaches and players coming off a shift looking at an iPad where they bring up video using the various solutions we have to see a play, to see what happened, to see what worked well, to see what broke down. And the collaboration that we've had with Apple has been sensational to enable us to bring technology into the game. And we also have extensive video replay, and bringing technology. We've always believed that you don't change the game to adapt to the technology, because the game, first and foremost, starting at your transition point at integrity, but to be able to adapt technology to the game has been sensational.
Mm-hmm. I remember when the iPads were first introduced, I remember Mike Sullivan with the Penguins saying that using it well had been a competitive advantage, and that's the only cup run they had. And certainly we're going to see everyone trying to find every little small edge that they can get out of this.
Well, because our players and coaches are so good, and you look for every single edge you can get, and technology will enable you to do that. And as important, it gives fans, particularly younger fans who use computers more, want their own tailored experience in how they connect with sports. It gives you the ability to delve into the game and look for the data points and factoids that you find interesting. And as we continue to unleash the power of puck and player tracking, I think that's going to engage more and more fans. I think it's going to give our existing fans that wanted a rich and even more vibrant experience. I think it will attract new fans who may not understand the game, and this will help bring them closer. And if you're my age or my generation, if you want to sit back and just continue to have a passive experience, you can do that as well. It's not, it takes us away from a one-size-fits-all solution in delivering content.
Yeah, I know NBC had a very good telecast with having that second screen option that would be very data heavy, where everyone else could use the traditional. And actually, one of your executives made a good point too, that here we are, 20 or 25 years since the original Fox glowing puck, and if that were introduced today, the reaction might have been very different.
Well, two things about that. The Fox glowing puck and David Hill was sensational to even think about coming up with that. It was ahead of its time. Both in terms of the viewing audience ready for it, but also the technology was a little too primitive at the time. Although, interestingly enough, the use of visual insertions, such as the 1st and 10 line that they use in football, actually was the outgrowth of the glowing puck. It was the glowing puck that was the next leap as they were trying to make it work. And that was a lot easier to do, because that was static. Trying to keep up with our game and the speed of our game and the interaction of players at that speed and the puck moving around as it does, Fox Tracks was the right. Whoops, I'm back.
Right. And I know the first component of the tracking system is the puck and player using the chips and sensors. And I know there's an optical solution that's been in development. I know SportLogic had been tested for a while. Is there any update as to when that might be available as well?
Well, actually, that's what's being used now. And so it's all part of a grander system. And there's been some use of it by the broadcasters throughout the conference finals. And I think you'll see more extensive use of it once we get to the Stanley Cup final. And I will say, harkening back to something we talked about in the bubble, I think the way that we've crafted the 2 arenas that we're using, and now the one in Edmonton, Rogers Place, the use of technology, the way we've covered seats, the video boards that we're using, the sound enhancements that we've used, the number of broadcast people that have called me to say, you know what, the way you've done it, you don't even notice that there aren't fans in the building. Now, having been in the building without the fans, it's a bit of an eerie experience. And if you've been to a hockey game, there's no better in-person experience. And we miss, more than you can imagine, our fans in the building. And I'm not talking about from a revenue standpoint. I'm talking about from the energy and the excitement. But the broadcasts have worked very, very well in terms of the visual and audio elements.
Sure. Actually, Sport Techie's very first major event was at Barclays in tandem with an Islanders game a few years ago. So we certainly know firsthand. And speaking sort of broadly about arenas, you have one coming online in Seattle fairly soon, and the Islanders, of course, are in the early stages of building theirs. Do you think about arenas differently now that we've gone through this pandemic? Do they need to be, those in existence, be retrofitted, or any changes to the new ones in relation to what's going on in the world right now?
Well, the new arenas, and actually they're both on a pretty similar timetable. The one at Belmont, New York, and the one at Seattle. I think in terms of making sure that they're technologically outfitted, state of the art, particularly as it relates to Wi-Fi and 5G, is going to be very important. And both arenas are very focused on their ecological impact. The Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle is intent upon being the most environmentally neutral arena or stadium in the world. And I know Belmont's focused on the same thing, the UBS arena. So I think it's really about being state of the art. It's about having the amenities and being comfortable. It's about the arenas having a footprint that has no or as limited an environmental impact as possible. I'm not sure we're going to start retrofitting our arenas anytime soon. The hope and the expectation is at some point we're going to get to the other side of the pandemic and our arenas will be full again, because that's really what sports is about. Sports has always been about bringing people together in large numbers to share a common, exciting, entertaining experience. Obviously, there may need to be some adjustments that are more temporary if subject to the governmental authorities in each jurisdiction. If socially distanced attendance is permitted, then we're all going to have to adapt to that. But I don't view that as long-term. I'm hoping at some point, for whatever reason and however it happens, we get back to a more normal existence. We did, just as a point of history, get through, not that any of us were here, the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, 1919. The only reason I bring that up, that 1919 was one of only 2 times that the Stanley Cup wasn't presented, and that was because of the Spanish flu, and they couldn't complete the final, which is why, going back to another question, I'm a little superstitious and I don't want to jinx it.
If we could see your fingers, I'm sure they'd be crossed. So during the pause, teams tried to be very creative and clever with creating their own, to go back to you being a piece of content today. They were all trying to get social media content, certainly from the league office and league network as well. Did any of those fan engagement initiatives stand out to you? And it seems like this is a period of innovation to keep connected to fans.
We had decided immediately, upon taking the pause, that we had to fill all of our channels and find a myriad of ways to connect with our fans. And our content people may have never worked harder in their lives than they did during the pandemic, whether or not it was bringing in players who had played in games 5, 10, 20 years ago and talking over them in terms of what they remembered, whether it was doing a trivia show that PK Subban did, whether it was doing vignettes. We were putting together as much content as humanly possible to keep our fans engaged, and our broadcast partners were great in running it, and we were streaming online, and it was just giving people something to do in the absence of games, particularly because we knew that they were home. And then a number of our clubs, including us, were running esports tournaments. We've run a world championship for esports for hockey fans using our game over the last 3 years, and that was something that we thought would engage fans as well. So any way you could touch our game, and it resulted in us creating lots and lots of content, we were looking to do for our fans to help deal with the time and the fact that people were home with not a lot of things to do, and they were missing their connection to our game. We do have, our fans tend to be most avid statistically from surveys, not me just saying it, of all fans in all sports. And they were missing the game, and we wanted to do everything we could. We were doing virtual press conferences, as were the clubs, virtually every day, making sure that people could feel connected. And it was also great for the NHL personnel, particularly our players, because they were missing what they do every day, and to be able to connect and still feel a part of the game was very, very important.
How are your own video game skills?
Terrible. My grandson, my oldest grandson, can take me down with blindfolded.
Given how that was received, do you see the esports becoming a larger component of what you do?
We have, as I said, we did the esports world championships for the last 3 years, culminating during our award show window when we've been in Las Vegas. Is it modestly a way to increase revenues? Yes. For us, it's always been about finding ways for people, particularly Gen Zs, to connect with the game. And a number of people have told me that they first became fans and learned about the game playing video games. And so using esports or video games as another touch point to bring people into the game and to keep them in the game was something that was always important to us. And that's how we viewed the most important element of esports.
Mm-hmm. On a different note, certainly during the summer, we also saw a lot of conversations around social justice, and of course, there was a very visible and public, protest in which players didn't take the field of competition. I know that was very much a player-driven initiative. How would you assess how the league handled it, and how can you support the players going forward?
We had always believed, and we had that in terms of moving forward to make our game as diverse and inclusive as possible, that we made great strides over the last couple of decades. But I think at this point in time, as we reflect on it, we need to do better, and we will do better. I know there was a lot of focus on all sports and whether or not the players wanted to play at a particular point in time. Our players made the decision, which I think made it a very important and authentic decision, that even though they were in the bubble, we were in the middle of playoffs, they wanted to take 2 days for reflection and to focus. And as we've been saying from the outset, to make our game as inclusive and as diverse as possible, and to make it as welcoming as possible to anyone from any background, it was important that all of our players get engaged. And that's what's going on. We're having the difficult conversations. We're focused on education and training. We have a hotline that will be up and running shortly. And we're going to make sure that hockey at all levels, with the NHL using its platform to be an example and to be a model of what needs to be done. We can, as I said, be better, and we will be better. And we're focusing more than we ever have, and I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then the other major focus, this Sports Capital Symposium, one of the other major components is on the business side of things. And it's hard not to notice that, I live here in Queens, and the Queens baseball team is being sold for $2.5 billion. As franchise valuations go up in all sports, one of the topics that's been mentioned is like the idea of whether private equity can be investing in ownership. Is that something that the NHL would consider?
We haven't had to yet, and I'm a big fan of private equity. But at the end of the day, our franchise ownership, the state of our franchises, has never been healthier, never been stronger. There are some who suggest that what private equity will do will simply drive up prices. And I guess if you're an owner, that's a good thing. There may be a need for more equity depending on the economic consequences of not being able to have fans and what's going on in terms of how the pandemic's affecting all sports businesses, or any business, I suppose, where you depend on people being there. it's something we're looking at. Some of the leagues are jumping further and faster, and that's fine. But as long as our ownership is sound and healthy, I don't think there's been any need to rush in that direction. We don't have an ideological objection to private equity, but I think it's really case by case, as needed basis.
Mm-hmm. When you were quarantining and isolating in your hotel room, what was top of mind? What kept you awake at night?
Oh, well, the same thing that has been keeping me awake since the middle of March. How do we get through this? Making sure that we're keeping our players safe and all our personnel here safe, the bubble getting through and completing the Stanley Cup final. I may, if we're fortunate, and I hope we will be enough for me to present the Stanley Cup that night, when I'm done being as wired as I might be, I might get a good night's sleep and not wake up in a cold sweat on the myriad of things that we have to deal with in uncharted territories. Listen, I say this with my tongue in my cheek. Part of the reason that I think we've been able to this point be as successful as we've been is we've had a fair amount of experience of operating when we haven't been operating. And so I understood the dynamic of what we needed to do, particularly creation of content, keeping fans involved and informed, making sure our teams are healthy and stable. But there's obviously a lot going on in this world that we have no control over. And you've got to be ready to adapt and respond. You have to be agile as an organization. You have to be flexible. And you got to try and do your homework. And all of that on a whole host of subjects in a world that is dynamically changing every day is enough to keep you awake at night, or when you're in self-isolation, hopefully it doesn't drive you crazy.
You certainly found quite a silver lining there. When it comes, you mentioned how it was eerie to be at these games without any other fans, and certainly the broadcast can pick up more of the chatter on the ice. Does it open ideas for new ways for broadcasters to get closer to the action? Do the players seem to welcome having microphones closer and picking up more?
Some yes, some no. Depends on what gets picked up. And sometimes what happens is, and we see this occasionally, where media or social media think they heard something which isn't exactly what was said or how it was directed. So there's always going to be a little bit of controversy. But in terms of having all access, and you see it in the content we put together, Quest for the Stanley Cup, our players, our teams, our general managers, our coaches have gotten more comfortable and used to there being more access. Our fans are loving getting inside the game and seeing things they never saw before inside of locker rooms, hearing coaches give speeches, seeing the way players interact. I think that's all good for the fan experience, and our players have been very supportive of taking that step forward. It's not without its risks and its challenges, but anything good and important as you try to move forward presents a risk and a challenge, and you just have to address them head on.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we're down to our final minute here. What prediction I know you don't predict games themselves, but what do you think hockey? What's your quick take on what hockey will look like a year from now?
Hopefully, we'll be back in our buildings with sold out arenas, which is, we typically played about 95% of capacity in the regular season and over 100% in the playoffs. There is an energy and there is an excitement that is not replicated, I believe, in any other sport. And as great as our TV partners are, NBC in the US and Rogers in Canada, there is nothing like being at a game. And we hope to be back the way things were as soon as possible. And in the interim, we'll make the adjustments and do the adaptations that we need to do to make sure that our game is as healthy and as competitive and as entertaining as possible.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Commissioner.
Live
from the NHL bubble. And I know it's also particularly early in the morning in Edmonton. So thank you again for that. Best of luck for a good conclusion to the rest of the Stanley Cup Finals.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.